Hi, I'm Ken LeBrun, and this is Faith Points. Today we're going to be talking about how to observe the Sabbath. And the first thing we want to look at is when the Sabbath begins and ends. And it begins and ends the same time of day that every other day begins and ends in the Bible. We find that out in Genesis chapter 1. And in verse 5 it says, "And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night, and the evening and the morning were the first day." So the first day started with the evening, and then it went to the morning. We see in Genesis 1:8, "And God called the firmament heaven, and the evening and the morning were the second day." And this was the pattern all the way through creation week. Verse 13 says the evening and the morning were the third day. Verse 19 says the evening and the morning were the fourth day. Verse 23 says, "And the evening and the morning were the fifth day." And verse 31 says, "And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good, and the evening and the morning were the sixth day." So the days begin in the evening. Now in Leviticus 23 verse 32 we find that this applies to the Sabbaths and holy days also. It says, "And it shall be unto you a Sabbath of rest, and ye shall afflict your souls in the 9th day of the month at even. From even unto even shall ye celebrate your Sabbath." So the Sabbath begins at even. Well, what does even mean in the King James Bible? Mark 1:32 says, "And at even when the sun did set." So even or evening is when the sun sets. So that's when the Sabbath begins. That's when the holy time begins that belongs to God. Now in Isaiah chapter 58, we learn about the observance of the Sabbath, and that the Sabbath is not to be treated like other days. Isaiah 58:13, "If thou turn away thy foot from the Sabbath, from doing thy pleasure on my holy day, and call the Sabbath a delight, the holy of the Lord, honorable, and shalt honor him, not doing thine own ways, nor finding thine own pleasure, nor speaking thine own words." So what that means is that the Sabbath is not a day for doing our own activities, doing our own thing that we would want to do as for our own pleasure. It's a day that belongs to God. Now in Nehemiah we learn one of the specific things of what is not appropriate on God's holy day. In Nehemiah 10:31 it says, "And if the people of the land bring ware or any victuals on the Sabbath day to sell, we would not buy it of them on the Sabbath." Well, it turns out that they didn't keep their pledge, because in chapter 13 of Nehemiah, Nehemiah says, "In those days saw I in Judah some treading wine presses on the Sabbath, and bringing in sheaves, and lading asses, as also wine, grapes, and figs, and all manner of burdens, which they brought into Jerusalem on the Sabbath day. And I testified against them in the day wherein they sold victuals. There dwelt men of Tyre also therein, which brought fish and all manner of ware, and sold on the Sabbath unto the children of Judah and in Jerusalem. Then I contended with the nobles of Judah, and said unto them, What evil thing is this that ye do, and profane the Sabbath day?" So it was profaning the Sabbath day for them to buy and sell on the Sabbath. Nehemiah goes on to say, "Did not your fathers thus, and did not our God bring all this evil upon us and upon this city? Yet ye bring more wrath upon Israel by profaning the Sabbath." And it came to pass that when the gates of Jerusalem began to be dark before the Sabbath, I commanded that the gates should be shut, and charged that they should not be opened till after the Sabbath. And some of my servants set I at the gates, that there should be no burden be brought in on the Sabbath day. So here it tells us that this type of commerce should not be taking place on the Sabbath, but it also tells us when they were to stop that activities. It said in verse 19, "When the gates of Jerusalem began to be dark before the Sabbath." So when it starts to get a little dark just before the sun sets, that's when they were to stop their buying and selling. That's when the holy time would begin. Now, some people say, well, I keep a Sabbath every day. Every day is holy to God. Well, if you're keeping a Sabbath every day, you're not going to be working every day. Notice what it says in Exodus 34:21. It says, 6 days shalt thou work, but on the seventh day thou shalt rest. So there is to be a difference between the 6 working days and the seventh day. On the 6 days of the week, that's the days to work. And we are commanded here to work on those 6 days. But on the seventh day, it is to be different. 6 days shalt thou work, but on the seventh day thou shalt rest. In earing time and in harvest thou shalt rest. Earing means plowing in the Old English word that's used there in the King James Version. And so whether it's plowing time or harvest time or any other time when there's much urgent work to be done, the Bible says we still need to rest and honor God's Sabbath day. There are some things, however, that are appropriate to be done on the Sabbath that might otherwise be considered work. And one of those is taking care of the sick. The sick need to be cared for on the Sabbath. Notice what happened here in Matthew chapter 12. Talking about Jesus, it says, when he was departed thence, he went into their synagogue, and behold, there was a man which had his hand withered. And they asked him, saying, is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath days? That they might accuse him. And he said unto them, what man shall there be among you that shall have one sheep, and if it fall into the pit on the Sabbath day, will he not lay hold on it and lift it out? How much then is a man better than a sheep? Wherefore it is lawful to do well on the Sabbath days. Then he said unto the man, stretch forth thine hand. And he stretched it forth, and it was restored whole, like as the other. And so Jesus healed people on the Sabbath day. It was not inappropriate to relieve suffering on the Sabbath. Another story in Luke chapter 13. It says, and he was teaching in one of the synagogues on the Sabbath, and behold, there was a woman which had a spirit of infirmity 18 years, and was bowed together, and could in no wise lift up herself. And when Jesus saw her, he called her to him, and said unto her, woman, thou art loosed from thine infirmity. And he laid his hands on her, and immediately she was made straight, and glorified God. So here Jesus healed this woman. Now the Pharisees didn't like that either, because it says, and the ruler of the synagogue answered with indignation, because that Jesus had healed on the Sabbath day, and said to the people, there are 6 days in which men ought to work, and them therefore come and be healed, and not on the Sabbath day. The Lord then answered him and said, thou hypocrite, doth not each one of you on the Sabbath loose his ox or his ass from the stall, and lead him away to watering? And ought not this woman, being a daughter of Abraham, whom Satan hath bound, lo, these 18 years, be loosed from this bond on the Sabbath day? And so Jesus made it clear that relieving suffering, taking care of the sick, is appropriate. It's in keeping with the sanctity of the Sabbath. We learned something in Mark chapter 15, verse 42, about how to prepare for the Sabbath. It says, now when the even was come, because it was the preparation, that is, the day before the Sabbath. And so the preparation day, Friday, is the day to prepare for the Sabbath. It's the day to take care of the cooking and cleaning and the washing and everything that you need to do to make sure that you're ready when the sun sets on Friday. Hebrews chapter 10, verse 25 talks about the importance of assembling together as Christians. It says, not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together, as the manner of some is, but exhorting one another, and so much the more as ye see the day approaching. So it's important for Christians to come together. Well, when is more appropriate to come together than on the Sabbath day? It says in Leviticus 23:3, 6 days shall work be done, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of rest and holy convocation. Ye shall do no work therein. It is the Sabbath of the Lord in all your dwellings. That word convocation means assembly. It's a gathering of God's people together. And so the seventh day is for a holy convocation, the assembling of God's people together in joint worship of God together. So here are some tips for making the Sabbath a special day. All week we look forward to the Sabbath and make plans for it, scheduling our week so that all secular activities will be completed before sundown on Friday. Friday is called the preparation day. We try to avoid extra activities on Friday that would hinder our Sabbath preparation. On that day, we do our final house cleaning. We make sure all the food and clothing we will need on Sabbath is in readiness. The shoes are shined, the shirts are ironed, and the car is cleaned and filled with gas. As the children help in Sabbath preparation, the Sabbath becomes more special to them. At sundown on Friday, the Sabbath begins. Before that time, all secular papers and other matters have been laid aside in order to welcome God's happy day. The opening of the Sabbath finds the family bathed and in clean clothes, gathered for worship and singing. In the winter, the longer Friday nights provide a special time for the family. Turn on some soft Sabbath music, or better yet, get out the instruments or stand around the piano and sing. Gather by the fire and read stories of missionaries and our early church workers. Play a Bible game or let each one recite his memory verses. Sabbath morning begins early with personal prayer, Bible study, and consecration to God. This is not a morning to sleep in. A special Sabbath breakfast has been prepared the day before. Sabbath music is playing as the family prepares for church. At church, our dress and conversation and behavior show that we are there to worship God. We show reverence in God's house. Sabbath afternoons may be spent walking in nature, singing gospel hymns and playing instruments, participating in church activities, reading Sabbath books, doing missionary work, visiting the sick and elderly, having a Bible study, playing Bible games, drawing or illustrating Bible stories, finding and sharing spiritual object lessons. At sunset, we close the Sabbath with worship. We praise God for the happy Sabbath we have enjoyed and ask for His blessing on the coming week. How long will the Sabbath be observed? Isaiah 66, verse 22 and 23. It says, "For as the new heavens and the new earth, which I will make, shall remain before me, saith the Lord, so shall your seed and your name remain. And it shall come to pass that from one new moon to another, and from one Sabbath to another, shall all flesh come to worship before me, saith the Lord." So even in the earth made new, when sin is done away with, throughout the rest of eternity, from one Sabbath to another, God's people will come and worship the Lord together and enjoy that united worship on God's holy Sabbath day. Have you noticed that the Sabbath has been getting more attention in the news lately? According to Bible prophecy, the Sabbath will become a major issue in the last days. Find out more about that in the video Bible Prediction, Americans to Lose Their Liberties. The book of Revelation tells us what to expect in the near future in the United States and around the world. But though troublous times are certainly coming, God has promised to honor His people who keep His commandments.